Hello and welcome to this short course about how to support your child to feel calm and in control if they're struggling with anxieties and worries. This course is primarily aimed at parents and carers of younger children, so those up to about the age of 10 or 11. However, there are lots of ideas in here that could easily be applied to older children or that might be used for those who are working with children rather than parenting or caring for them. So lots of ideas in here to get you thinking, and hopefully there'll be some things in here that you think you can take away and adapt for use with the child in your care. I really hope that you find it helpful. One of the first things I think it's really important for us to understand and to be able to explain to our children is, why do we get anxious anyway? What is this? When we understand a little bit more about anxiety, it makes it feel a little bit less scary. If you think about it from the point of view of a child, when you get that physiological response to anxiety, it feels very strange and it's quite scary. If you don't know this happens to other people too, you might think there's something really, really wrong with you. So let's backpedal a bit and understand, why do we feel anxious sometimes? So anxiety and our body's response to when we're anxious and worried is our body getting ready to keep us safe. So if we needed to suddenly run from a tiger, we need to be ready to fight or flee. And our body gets really ready for that. Our heart goes really fast. Lots of things stop happening, so our digestion sort of shuts down. That's why we get our funny feelings in our tummies. And we get ready to fight. The problem is that we get that same kind of fight or flee type response when the thing that's making us anxious is maybe doing maths in class. And that response isn't helpful in that moment. We've just got then loads of anxiety coursing through our body. But understanding that our bodies respond in that way in order to keep us safe, and maybe talk to your child about cavemen and how they would have been kept safe, and that we've basically kept on to those physiological responses. Our bodies do the same things even though we're not cavemen anymore. Understanding that helps it to feel a bit less scary. The other thing that helps it to feel a bit less scary is knowing that it feels like this for everybody. So when you say to your child, actually, sometimes I get worried too, and sometimes my palms go all clammy, or I find that I start breathing quite quickly, or I feel my heart going boom, 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 boom in my chest. And they realise that this happens to mummy or daddy or their carer as well. That makes it a bit less scary. If you've got more than one child, or you're working with a group of children, then actually thinking together about the way that we feel when we're scared, when we're worried, can help everybody to realise that, oh, it's not just me, and that makes it okay. You can also reassure children that when they feel this panic, they feel this worry, when they're ready to fight and flee, that they're going to be okay. That those feelings will only last for a short period of time. And if we can find a way to get through that tricky moment, that the things will begin to feel a little bit better. It's also really interesting to explore with a child the fact that anxiety feels different for different people, and we might imagine it in different ways as well and conceptualize it a little bit differently. So sometimes if I'm talking to a child, I might think about different animals and have different animals that might represent how I'm feeling, or I might use colors, or I might draw it or paint it or create it through music. There's all sorts of different ways, but what you're looking for really is to try and remove some of the scariness around the idea of worry and anxiety and get talking about it. And you can do that brilliantly through play and the creative arts, and just by having a bit of a chat about it. You don't have to have the perfect words in order to be able to begin to explore this, and the more that you explore it, the more that you talk about it or play about it or sing about it or whatever works for you and your family, the less scary it seems. And the more that we can take the fear out of the anxiety, the more we are likely to be able to take control and feel a little bit calmer. Whilst there are lots of different strategies that I can teach you to help take control and calm down a little bit when we feel anxious, in order to really overcome the problem, we've got to get to the heart of the matter and understand what is triggering this feeling of anxiety for a child. So we need to find ways to explore that. And again, it goes back to that idea I shared before about beginning to really talk about it or explore it through play. One thing that I always remind people is that if we can find a way to name it, then we're halfway to finding a way to tame it. So we name it to tame it. So if a child's got all sorts of difficult worries and fears and anxieties going around and around and around in their head, that feels deeply uncomfortable and worrying. But if we can capture those worries in some way and write them down or draw them or speak about them, then we can, hopefully with the support of a trusted adult, begin to think, what are we going to do about this? Also, when a child shares their worry, it makes that load lighter. So I like to imagine worries being a little bit like a heavy burden that we carry around with us. And it can be quite difficult carrying that burden all on our own sometimes. And maybe an adult who we trust can't take the worry away completely always. We'd love to, but we can't always. But when someone carries the burden with you, then the load is lighter. So if a child can find a way to share what's on their mind in a way that makes sense and feels comfortable to them, then automatically that burden becomes a little lighter because they're no longer alone carrying it. Remember, a worry is a worry if it's worrying the child. It doesn't matter if you think it's inconsequential. If it feels big to the child, it's a significant worry, and they need to feel heard while we explore it and think what to do next with that worry. Some worries, of course, are just for adults to carry, and we need to think really carefully about how to take those worries away from a child if we feel that they're carrying a lot of adult worry burdens. So sometimes we might say, this is one for mummy to worry about, not for you, or this is one for daddy to worry about and not for you. That's okay, I've got this, I can carry this one, you don't need to worry about this anymore. Children often need reminding and reassuring, particularly if they've gone through quite a challenging time. Even very young children will find themselves carrying adult worry burdens unless we explicitly say, it's okay, we've got this, you don't need to carry this one. If you're struggling to work out how to communicate with your child and understand what are the triggers for their worry and what is this worry burden that they're carrying, a really good and simple way to begin to explore what's going on for them is to walk through a typical day. And you think about the day from the moment that your child opens their eyes and wakes up in the morning until the moment that they lay down to go to sleep at night. And you just walk through a normal day and you think about how are you feeling at this point and what's happening then. And we're looking for the moments when they feel more worried, more anxious, when things feel a bit difficult, and for the moments when things feel a bit calm, when they're in control and they're a little bit happier. We're trying to learn from both the difficult, challenging moments and from the good, positive, calmer, happier moments. These both can help to inform our thinking and give us ideas of what to do next. But crucially, in the first instance here, we're trying to identify what are the things that are causing this worry burden for this child. Are there places, faces, spaces, things, experiences that are cropping up that are causing a significant amount of worry? Once we've begun to pinpoint them, even if the child can't fully verbalise what's going on there, but you know that usually at this time in the morning or in this place they begin to feel a little more anxious and worried, then we can begin to think what to do next. You can do this by simply exploring a typical day with a child. If you have a child who's got a visual timetable, perhaps you have an autistic child, then you can walk through their visual timetable with them, thinking about the different points in the day that way. Or you can ask the child or an adult supporting them, or indeed do it yourself, just to take note over the course of a day or several as to how a child feels at each given moment in the day and chart their mood over a series of hours and days to see where the peaks and troughs come. And you can do that simply by using a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is very, very calm and 10 is really, really anxious, and ranking how they're feeling throughout the day. Or children might prefer to use colours or animals to represent how they're feeling. And you might just check in with them regularly and say, are we feeling more chinchilla or cheetah right now, or whichever animals you've chosen to represent it. There's no right and wrong way of doing this. It's about finding a language, a vocabulary, a way of referring to this that works for you and works for your child, so that you can start to have these conversations. The more you talk about it, the more you explore it through your words and through play, the better each of your understanding will be, and then you have your starting points for making change. We're going to think next about how we can break the cycle of anxiety and how we can avoid exacerbating that cycle. Now, this happens all the time because maybe you've done some of the things that we suggested a little bit earlier on, and you've managed to identify that there are particular places or people or things that cause significant worry and anxiety for your child. As a parent, as a carer, as an adult in that child's life, our instinct is often to protect them, to take them away from the thing that makes them sad or angry or upset, because we don't want them to feel like that, because that's horrible. But the problem here is that basically what happens is the child's brain is worried about the thing, the place, the whatever. The thing that they're worried about, their brain is saying to them, don't go there, don't do that. If you do, something terrible will happen. That's the story happening in their brain, even if they can't verbalize it. When we take them away from that thing, we stop them going there, doing that, being with the thing that causes the worry, the anxiety. When we stop that, their brain goes, whew, well, that was a lucky escape, because if you had gone there and done the thing, then all the terrible things would have happened. Thank goodness you didn't go there. And so actually what happens then is that kind of adds evidence for the brain to, that would have been really bad. We mustn't ever go there. We're really worried about that thing, even more worried than we were before. So that worry kind of builds, and the child becomes less and less able to do that thing, go to that place, continue to engage with whatever it was that was causing some worry or anxiety. What we need to support instead is really hard, and particularly if your child becomes distressed, but in an ideal world, we need to try and support and scaffold a situation where the child can be exposed to the scary thing in a way that they have a positive or at least a neutral experience. What happens then is the brain goes, oh, I thought that was going to be really bad. I thought everyone was going to point and laugh at me, for example. But actually, it was okay. It was all right. I can do this. Okay, I'm happy to try again next time. And so then we begin to build our cycle of what we can do. So how do you do that? With very careful planning. The pitfall that we need to avoid here is we do not want to insist on exposure to the scary thing unless we can be certain that we've done everything we possibly can, either to ensure that the child has a neutral or a positive experience, so the brain can go, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad, or that we've got really good planning in place for how to pick them back up if they do stumble and trip. So if the bad thing happens, what next? How do we make sure it's okay? If we don't do that careful planning and that careful scaffolding and supporting, so the child faces the scary thing and the worst happens, everyone laughs and points and I haven't got a backup plan, if that happens, it reinforces what the brain always thought would happen, and the child says, no, not going there again, definitely not doing that, I told you this would happen. So, no pressure, you need to help the child face the scary thing and make sure it's okay. That sounds really hard, but actually very often for children things get bigger and bigger and bigger. Worries get bigger and bigger and bigger in our head. And when we've got someone next to us who loves us, who cares for us, who will guide us and hold our hand either literally or metaphorically while we face the scary thing, it's surprising what we can do. And it's surprising how often it actually turns out okay. Okay, so we've understood we've got to go towards the scary thing. We've got to run towards the distress with our child and help them to manage it and for it to be okay. Now, how we make this work is by creating I can cycles, which is my way of describing basically very, very rapid, tiny cycles of positive reinforcement. So when a child is struggling with worries and anxieties, what will often happen is that they've got a very negative self-narrative going on. The stories in their own head about themselves are not always good. Their head is full of the things that they can't do, the things that they won't do, the things they would do badly, and all of the bad things. What we need to do is to try and find a little chink of light in that darkness and help the child to understand the things that they can do. That can be very hard, particularly if these cycles have gone on for a while, because the child might be getting lots of input from other people about what they can't do, where they haven't gone, what they haven't been able to achieve. So we need to help them to succeed. And the way that you can help a child to succeed when perhaps their world has got quite small and things feel really challenging and they're overwhelmed with what they can't do, is to find very, very teeny tiny things that feel so small that it would be almost impossible to fail. We identify those things as things that maybe, even in their most difficult, challenging moments, they feel that maybe, just maybe, they can do that. So an example here would be, I often support families where a child is struggling to attend school, where they're very, very anxious about going into school. And the idea of going there and being there is just so huge. And often we aim right up here and we think, can we get the child into school for a week? We need to get much, much, much tinier. We need to aim really low because we don't want to miss. So instead, I might be saying, do you think that you could maybe walk past the school at the weekend when it's quiet? You don't have to stay there, you don't have to look at it, could you just walk past when it's quiet? Or we might be saying to that child, could you just sit and hold a pencil in your hand in your bedroom where you feel safe? Or maybe you could just pop on your school cardigan for a couple of minutes and just see how that feels. You're looking for tiny things because what you want is for the child to realise, I can. And every time you find something that they can do, we try to hold on to that and we think, you can do that. And what next? And you'll be amazed when a child begins to feel, instead of I can't, I can, even when those steps are tiny, they begin to feel a bit more positive and a bit more like things are possible. And those tiny, tiny steps begin to build into something far more magnificent. The thing to remember here, because we're not used to saying, let's aim really low. It's just not how we're geared as a society. But the reason why we do this is because if you take a tiny baby step and you fall, because not every time will you succeed. You don't have too far to fall. But if you're trying to take kind of giant leaps, there's a long way to fall, and then it's very, very much more difficult to pick yourself back up again because you feel quite broken. If you fall from a tiny baby step, you don't have so far to fall back. And so it's much easier to dust yourself off and to start again. A final thought here on I can cycles is that we should be building these cycles with the child, always in communication with them. What do they think feels possible for them? How can we support them? How can we be motivated by their wants and wishes and desires? And also, as the adult in their life, the trusted adult here, your pride really matters. So make sure that when they do something that makes you proud, no matter how tiny, that you tell them, that you show them, that you let them know that you're really proud of them. Now, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room here, which is not meant as criticism, but we need to acknowledge it. And that is that anxious children make for anxious parents and carers, and anxious parents and carers make for anxious children. And it's a really tricky cycle to get out of. There's no blame being laid here, but we just need to face that happens and we need to try and shift out of that. So I'm going to share some ideas for how we do that. Why this happens, just to help you sort of understand, there's kind of really brilliant neuroscience behind it. So in our brains we have what's called mirror neurons, and these are kind of set up basically to mirror the people around us. It helps us to form bonds and relationships with people because as a species we're driven to try and get on with those around us. So one of the ways that this works is that if someone is calm and happy, then our mirror neurons fire back going, yeah, they're calm and happy, I'm calm and happy too. And if someone is angry, we respond with anger, and if they're anxious, we respond with anxiety. Added to that, if you have a child who is very worried, very anxious, and this has been going on a while, it's likely perhaps that you haven't had as much sleep as you'd like, that you've got a lot of worries on your mind, and there's lots of things that make it a little bit harder for you to be the very best version of yourself that you might really wish that you could be. Now, the thing here is that if we can kind of game it, fake it till we make it, we can really help to begin to break that cycle. So I can't, take you on a silent retreat and make you feel all zen and bring you back here completely fixed and everything happy and jolly, but I can give you a few hacks to help you appear calm and controlled to your child, which will mean that their mirror neurons respond with, Mum, Dad, my carer is calm and in control, therefore I'm calm and in control. It's surprisingly effective, even though it might not seem it. So my absolute favourite ninja strategy here is slow, low, low talking. And this is just thinking about how we speak. We are looking to say whatever words we're saying. It doesn't matter what you're saying, though we'll address that more in a moment. But whatever you're saying, we're looking to slow down the speed of our speech. Speak more slowly. We're looking to lower the volume, because when we're calm, we don't shout. And we're looking to lower the tone, because when we're calm, we're less shrill. If you think about what anxiety and anger sounds like, it's often very fast, very loud, and very shrill. And what we really want are the dulcet tones that might sound more like a bedtime story, that calm us down and feel like a bit of a kind of verbal hug. So you're looking to have that really calm, measured voice, even if inside you are freaking out and you're not sure what to do next. Just fake it till you make it. This is made easier if you think of a few phrases that can be your kind of go-to phrases. And I refer to these as my broken record phrases, because you can say them again and again and again and again. And they're kind of soporific. They feel reassuring, and the kind of cadence and the rhythm of that feels nice to your child. And in those moments of panic and anxiety, hearing the words that they need to hear from the person that they trust and love, said in a calm and measured way, can really quickly begin to calm not just them actually, but you too. You end up with this lovely kind of cycle back and forth, because you're trying to fake the calm, it helps them to begin to calm, and then you in turn respond by calming, and you support each other. On the other hand, if you respond to their anger or anxiety with anger or anxiety of your own, then you bounce off each other, and before we know it, everything's exploded and it's all challenging. I'm sure you can empathise with that one. So, broken record phrases, phrases that you can just say again and again and again and again and again in times of need. The kinds of things that work really well are often things around safety and reassurance to your child. So it will be something like, it's okay, I'm right here with you, or I'm listening, I really care, or just simply, I really, really love you. It just depends on who the child is and what they need to hear. And if they're a child who is able to articulate themselves well at times of calm, you might actually explore with them in calm moments what are the things that it's helpful for them to hear. And conversely, what are the words that they find really challenging and triggering? What should you be avoiding? Finding just 2 or 3 phrases that feel good, that you feel comfortable saying, and practicing them. Practice them when you're walking around or taking a shower or some other time when you might feel a little bit kooky doing it, but then you're ready. In those times when things feel really challenging, having something you've practiced loads so it's done almost as a reflex action is such a helpful thing to go to, and you're much more able to convey that calm and begin to convince the child and yourself to begin to centre and calm. All that said, sometimes it's just too hard. And if in doubt, if the mood is rising and you're getting more and more anxious or angry, and so is your child, if in doubt, if it's safe to do so, just take time out. And this can be as simple as simply turning away, taking a deep centering breath, maybe thinking about the breath entering your lungs, breathing as deeply as you can, and then blowing that breath out, and imagine that worry blowing away while you calm and center, and then refacing the situation. If you're in the fantastic position of having more than one adult who can support the child, perhaps you hand the baton over and you allow a calmer adult to come in and take over while you go and recenter yourself. But it's amazing how even 1 or 2 calming breaths where you really focus on trying to find that inner calm can be hugely, hugely helpful. It's really important when we're supporting a child who's struggling with anxiety that we celebrate when things go well. So maybe you're building those cycles of I can. Every little thing needs to be celebrated, because every little step forwards is really important and it's taking you towards where you hope and want to be. Exactly how we celebrate those gains will depend on what feels acceptable to the child or in the circumstance. So you don't want to ever embarrass your child or make them feel uncomfortable. But for some kids, they really need a wow, that's amazing, well done, woo, and you might cheer and celebrate and do all sorts of exciting things. You might have some kind of rewards chart or jar or something like that. Or you might have a child who prefers just a quiet well done a little bit later on. For some children, if there's lots of anxiety around the particular thing they've done, you might just allow them to quietly get on and do the thing. And sometimes you're sat there going, oh, I can't believe it, they're eating whatever, or they're talking to whomever, or they've done whatever, and I'm so proud I could burst. But in that moment, sometimes for some children, they just need to quietly get on with it in an understated way, because if you draw attention to the scary thing, suddenly it becomes scary again and oh my goodness, they can't do it. So just go steady and make sure you do note the achievement and you celebrate it and you let them know you're really proud, but you perhaps do that after they finish doing the thing. It's really helpful sometimes to write down those moments of pride or to capture a picture or image of some kind that can be used to mark this moment, because we want to collect all those gains and remind ourselves that we did this, we can do it, and we can do it again. And sometimes having a picture or having it written down and in some way recorded can mean that if things become a bit more difficult again, we can remind ourselves of when we were able to do this. Remember last Wednesday when you managed to go to X or play with Y or eat Z? We remind ourselves of that and we remember that, yeah, we can do this. It's also really important, as well as celebrating our gains, that we ensure they are maintained. So it can take a lot of hard work when a child is very anxious for their world to begin to broaden out a little bit. And those little tiny steps that you take might help to make their world a little bit bigger, and the things that they can do and the people they can engage with and the places that they go might begin to broaden out a bit. But if you don't keep practicing and they don't keep doing those things, sometimes the world begins to shrink back in again, because they don't get that constant reinforcement of, I can do this. So we need to think really carefully about, once we've got a child used to whatever is the scary thing, how do we enable them to keep that and not lose it? This is particularly important over things like the summer holidays, if a child suddenly doesn't have exposure to the thing they're worried about for a long time. Of course, during the pandemic, this is something that people would turn their minds to when children were in a period of lockdown, for example. And we might just think about revisiting some of those things that worry us and thinking about how can we sort of represent and replicate those skills in other ways. And if not, we just have to acknowledge that we might need to start from a different starting point next time and re-win our way back to where we'd got to before. We might not come from just the same starting point if we couldn't maintain those gains. But a key thing to remember is that if they've done it once, they can do it again. It might take hard work and a lot of support, but if you've done it once, you can do it again. Now, it would be lovely if anxiety and worries could be identified and then just got rid of. And sometimes once we've identified what those worries are and we've overcome them once, then we're able to make them go away. But for many children, if they have struggled with some form of worry or anxiety, then it's possible that this may be something that is, at least to some level, somewhat ongoing for them. That's okay, because there's lots and lots and lots that we can do to help us manage with a little bit of anxiety and worry each day. And remember, a little bit of anxiety and worry is a perfectly normal and actually quite healthy thing. If we had no worry, no anxiety, then we would find ourselves doing all sorts of silly and dangerous things all the time. So a certain degree of worry and anxiety is okay, but we need to learn strategies to help us manage it so it doesn't stop us from doing things. And just a note here, I guess, that we should be worried, significantly worried about a child, enough to maybe take them to the GP and get a referral. If those worries, those anxieties get to a point where they are invading lots of different parts of their life, stopping them from engaging in activities that they previously enjoyed, and if this is going on for a period of weeks or more. But for most children, these things are really manageable much of the time with a few simple tips and tricks. First of all is the power of the mini reset. This is something I talk about all the time. Basically, I think that worry and anxiety is sort of cumulative, and through the course of the day, then if we do not do something to kind of calm how we're feeling, we just get gradually more and more and more worried and anxious until we might get to the point, oh, it all becomes too much and we can't manage anymore. So instead, we think about how can we press the reset button just to bring that feeling of anxiety and worry back to a baseline that feels manageable. And we can do that as many times as we need to. There's all sorts of different ways that we might do that, but children might learn things like relaxation strategies or breathing techniques that they can use. They might have somewhere or someone to whom that they can go to calm. They might find something like journaling or drawing or playing can help them to work through those issues and worries periodically throughout the day. Just having moments, and it sometimes is as short as 60 seconds, to just take a breath and press reset can help them to just take control and find that place of relative calm so they can continue to meaningfully engage with their day-to-day activities. A next thing that's super helpful is identifying adults in a child's life who they can regularly check in with. So it may be if they are going to school, that there's a particular member of staff who knows that this is a child who just needs someone just to check that they're okay. And for many children, this can be a really small thing. It might just be a glance across the classroom from a teacher or a teaching assistant who lets that child know, it's okay, I'm here if you need me. And just knowing that that safety net is there is often enough. But of course, that adult should also be made aware of any things that can really help the child if they do begin to feel worried or anxious. And that more generally is a very helpful thing. As you gain more understanding about what helps your child and perhaps what triggers their anxiety, actually writing this down into some form of plan that's shareable with the different adults who support that child can be super helpful. And encourage that sharing to happen both ways. It's really helpful if all the adults around a child can communicate with each other, ideally with the child fully involved as well, so that everybody knows what they can do to support the child when needed. Some children will have this as a plan, as a kind of profile that goes with them. Some will have it on their phone if they're a little bit older, or they might have something like a lanyard around their neck with some prompts of things that can help them that they might even learn to do themselves rather than always having an adult to support them. The next thing in terms of managing every day is just planning ahead. When it comes to anxiety, we can do lots of our if-then planning. So we can look ahead to the day or the hour or the week ahead, whatever time frame feels comfortable, and we can try and identify where the worry moments are and think about, well, what could possibly go wrong there? And then try to think, well, what would we do if that did happen? Because when we have a backup plan in place, that can be quite reassuring, knowing that the very worst thing that could happen is X. And if that were to happen, then Y makes us feel like, okay, I'm prepared to give this a go. And it might sound a little bit negative, like we're thinking about all the possible dangers and worries. But when we take a child's worries seriously and we explore it with them and we try to think of different ways of managing it, it helps them to feel in control of their anxiety rather than feeling like the anxiety is controlling them. But finally, in terms of enjoying the everyday, just make sure that you give a child plenty of space to thrive. Some days will be good days. Leap on them, enjoy them, frolic and have fun. Children will not be anxious and worried all the time. Find the little glimmers and make those moments feel big and remember them, capture them and cherish them. And if a child begins to be doing better, don't hold them back with your worries about their worries. Many children will begin to work through these things and process them and pick up all sorts of different strategies along the way, and they might just surprise you. So make sure that you give them space to fly when they're ready to fly. I hope that you found some of the ideas in here helpful. It might be quite a lot to take on board and it might be helpful to revisit some at a later stage. The very best thing you can do is to work alongside your child and with them. Hear what they have to say, explore this together, be curious about what's going on for them and try to remain flexible. Different things work for different people at different times and we can never be quite sure what will work. So try new things. Figure it out together. Be detectives about your child's worries and anxieties and about what helps and makes things feel a bit better for them. Try not to get too hung up on it if you can, because otherwise their worries become your worries that become their worries, and that's quite tricky. Enjoy your child if you can. Look for those moments of fun and try not to let the worry weigh you down if you can avoid it. A final thought from me is, if those worries do get big for you as well as for your child, that's perfectly understandable and really quite common. If you find yourself in that situation, the very best thing that you can do to help your child is to think first about what you can do to help yourself. Whether that's in the form of exercising some good self-care, going back to the basics of sleep, diet and exercise, and connecting with people is a really good starting point. Or if it's that you might need a bit of additional input, you might go via your doctor or talk to friends in order to try and identify what's best next there. But think about how to support yourself. It's very, very difficult to be the adult that a child needs unless you first look after you. Good luck.